Morning, everyone. Welcome to the 2010 Media Summit. On behalf of Bloomberg BusinessWeek, we'd like to welcome all of you to sunny New York City. Probably to most of you, we'd like to welcome you to this particular block of 6th Avenue. So once again, we have a world-class gathering of media moguls, thought leaders, just interesting folks in the whole media space. I think it's going to be an exciting couple of days to really take a step back and look at many of the changes that are happening in our industry, and also just to rethink a lot of the business models, a lot of the trends that I think we've been re-examining year after year. But I think this is a particularly interesting year to consider what the right models are going forward. We expect to see a fair amount of discussion, a fair amount of debate, possibly even a good old classic Italian newsroom fistfight. For some of you who may have seen that video on CNN News Pulse, I would highly recommend you take a look at it. I'd like to say a special thanks to our keynote speakers, John Klein, President of CNN US, also Arthur Sulzberger, Jr., Chairman of the New York Times Company, Publisher of the New York Times, and Janet Robinson, President and CEO of the New York Times Company. Obviously, three great leaders in the media space. It's going to be fascinating to get their take on the media market, what's happening, what they're doing with their particular organizations at these very interesting times. At last year's Media Summit, we were at an interesting point in time. We were in the midst of the financial crisis. The stock market was down. The ad market was down. There were some iconic publishing brands that were going out of business. Really a very challenging time for the media business, and boy, it's good to be away from all of that now a year later. That was a joke. We could probably debate all day what the future of the economy is. Are we out of it? Are we not out of it? Are we at the top of the ad market, at the bottom of the ad market? I think we can all agree, though, that this year has been another year of significant change. If you just go down a short list of some of the interesting things, NBC going to Comcast, BusinessWeek to Bloomberg, some well-known deals from prior eras unwinding. I think on the publishing side, some announcements of paid models, and also I think publishing companies finding the confidence to seek better arrangements with some of their channel partners, and obviously in the network broadcasting side, seeking fees from local TV. So I think across the board, it's another year of significant change, which is sort of the thing we talk about every year. So I think the way to put the next couple of days in context is really a chance to step back, turn off the BlackBerries and the iPhones and the cell phones. Another joke. And really just to take some time to listen to what other folks are doing and take a little bit of time away from the office to re-examine some of these consumer trends, check our assumptions, ask the questions about our business model and our strategies. I do think that in times of stress, economic stress, it does sharpen our strategies, our strategic thinking a bit. It forces us to tighten up our operational models. So in many ways, it's healthy for our business to force us into these moments to re-examine and to do it in the context of each other. To have this level of expertise and dialogue, I think, is very, very important for us. So speaking of change, we've seen a bit of that at Bloomberg BusinessWeek. Insert advertorial here. It's been almost 3 months now since BusinessWeek and Bloomberg came together, and we're on the cusp of a relaunch of an exciting new magazine. And in terms of trends, we're going against most of the trends that we've seen in the marketplace. We're building a magazine that has more pages, more stories, thicker paper, increased frequency, and built on top of an integrated newsroom now that is roughly 2,300 reporters around the world. I just came back from Tokyo last week, where we have gone from 3 reporters in the Tokyo office to 197. So in terms of size and reach and globality, we're on a mission to build the best business magazine out there. We're going to launch on April 23rd, and for any of you who would like to get a free copy of the launch edition, I would encourage you to go to new.businessweek.com and sign up, and we'd be happy to send one to you. So let's get started. First of all, we have Bloomberg BusinessWeek editor Josh Tyrangiel to speak with John. And so let me just tell you a little bit about Josh. Josh joined us way back in November of last year from Time Magazine, where he was deputy managing editor of Time Magazine and managing editor of Time.com. He brings a tremendous wealth of experience and knowledge, and was instrumental in expanding the coverage of politics, U.S. issues at Time magazine, and was responsible for the website, where in a matter of 3 years went from 400 page views to over 1.8 billion page views. We're very excited to have Josh here. Prior to Time, he was at Rolling Stone and Vibe, and I think when you see the new edition, you're going to see a great integration of both style and substance. We're all very excited to have him part of our team and have him here today. So without further delay, let me welcome Josh Tyrangiel.
Thank you, Paul. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming to the Media Summit. It's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, John Klein, president of CNN. John has been at CNN since 2005, overseeing programming and strategy during a time in which the network has experienced some incredible highs, like the 2008 campaign, and ferocious primetime competition from the likes of MSNBC and Fox. And certainly we'll talk about that more in a few minutes. John's journalism career started in local news at WLNE in Providence and at WPIX in New York. In 1982, he joined CBS News as a writer and editor on the overnight broadcast Night Watch, and subsequently served as the broadcast producer on CBS Morning News and then CBS Evening News, where he won an Emmy Award for live coverage of the 1986 Gorbachev-Reagan Reykjavik Summit in Iceland. In 1988, John joined the primetime magazine 48 Hours, where he won another Emmy for coverage of Hurricane Hugo, and a Peabody for an hour-long show about the anti-abortion movement. He was also senior producer for the network's coverage of the 1991 Gulf War. After 17 years at CBS, John founded the Feed Room, which is a broadband video company that's one of the leading internet broadcasters, with clients including NBC, ESPN, General Motors, and BusinessWeek.com. John has always had a love for storytelling across all platforms, and not just journalistic storytelling. He's sold 7 screenplays, one of which was made into the 1997 Emmy-nominated TNT movie Buffalo Soldiers. Like all modern media executives, and like the rest of us who work in modern media, John has the joy of waking up every day to a completely new and challenging landscape. It's so much fun. We're going to talk to him about those and many other things, but please put your hands together and welcome Jonathan Klein.
I like how you contrasted highs and then competition.
Yeah, I didn't want to go lows because I felt like that would skew the deal a little bit too early.
You're right.
You know, I'm saving the hard stuff.
Good.
And in that spirit, I want to open with, well, it's a softball.
I'll take it.
Okay, good. Yeah. Softballs are rare and few and far
keep them coming.
We'll see what we can do about that. So everyone here is aware of the speed with which business models, particularly media, can change. So let's start with something essential. Is nonpartisan 24-hour cable news a viable proposition today and a viable proposition going forward?
Well, judging from our results, it's very much a viable proposition. We're coming off of our most profitable year ever in 2009. Which culminated 6 straight years of double-digit profit growth. So it's been a great business for us because we're leveraged across 20 different properties. We talk a lot about CNN US, the cable network we all know and love, but there's international, there's headline news, there's our massive online effort both in the United States and then internationally. There's the airport network, there are a dozen or more different countries that have got CNN-branded channels there. When the earthquake erupted in Chile, some of the first reporting came from CNN Chile. And the guy who used to run what is now HLN runs CNN Chile, Rolando Santos. So, you know, we're in a lot of places, and I think that's the model that can be very successful. It's what everyone strives to be. Highly efficient in generating top quality journalism that can then be leveraged across multiple properties.
So of all those platforms, you're talking about 20 different sort of brands and multiple platforms, as you said. Where's the growth? Where do you see the top growth?
Online is a big growth area for us. Mobile has enormous growth potential, and domestic U.S. cable is actually a growth area. So it's a good place to be, especially if you've got, as we do, 2 fully distributed networks in CNN, US, and HLN. So there's a lot of room to grow.
I think all of us, there are very few independent media companies out there, all of us have heard the word synergy. It's sort of like a unicorn. You hear about it, you hear legend of this beautiful thing, and no one's really ever seen it in action. So why don't you tell me, how does all of this work? Give me an example of a synergy.
Well, you and I both come from Time Warner, and we miss you, by the way.
Oh, thank you very much.
Synergy, I think, is driven by people. Some of the best joint efforts that we've undertaken at CNN have been with HBO, working together on documentaries, airing each other's work, sharing talent sometimes. Fareed Zakaria just narrated an amazing HBO documentary on the Mumbai massacres, and we aired it on CNN US as well. That stems from a really strong relationship that some of us have with some of the top folks at HBO, Richard Plepler, Sheila Nevins. That makes it all possible. And I think the key to it is simply finding areas where you both can benefit. Having a gun put to your head by management never works. Jeff Bugis does not follow that approach, as you know, and as we work together, helping Time.com to increase its traffic via distribution through CNN.com, it helped both of us, right? CNNmoney.com is a joint effort between the Fortune Business Group and CNN. Very successful, great growth numbers. It's driven by personal relationships, I think, which then enable all the suspicion to kind of get pushed to the side and people to focus on what could truly be productive.
Right. Now, Jeff Lucas does not put a gun to anybody's head. He works far more subtly. But look, you run a fairly down-the-line division. How much of a priority do you make it? It's easy for you to call Richard Plepler and say, hey, we've got a great show, or you've got a great show. But how do you seed that? Because I think, as Paul alluded to, Bloomberg BusinessWeek went from 3 people in Tokyo to 197. So there's some self-interest here.
The business lunch should not be underestimated in doing that, or just in any, as with any relationship, it's best created without in a non-pressured environment. Right? It's when you're forced to do something that there's just too many gorillas in the room. But when you can actually forge relationships away from that have nothing to do with a specific project, you stand a better chance. Now, we place, just within the world of CNN worldwide, I listed, dozens of properties that we've got, let alone 1,000 affiliates around the world and around the United States. You've got to foster a climate of collaboration just within CNN worldwide for anything useful to get done. And I think a huge reason that we have doubled our profit over the last 4 years, is because we've learned to work together better. My boss, Jim Walton, who oversees CNN worldwide, places a huge premium on that. Just work together, not do a specific project together, but rather collaborate. And you will find ways to help each other.
So in addition to putting an emphasis on it, do you actually employ people who are kind of nexus points between divisions?
A couple. We just, we didn't used to, and then we discovered, especially with the relaunch of CNN.com a few months ago, we've placed a greater emphasis on video online. And CNN US is going to be one of the primary sources of that video. So we need to work together better to find those stories that are going to work well in the digital world. Some of those stories wouldn't work that well on CNN US because of subject matter, style, or what have you. But we've got to find where those two can manage to help one another. And so we've got now 2 people whose job it is to kind of straddle the worlds. They work for CNN US, but their clear mandate is to push more of our content into CNN.com. But that's not force feeding. That's not like creating foie gras. It's collaborating with the .com folks to understand what it is they need. And so far, so good. You learn a lot. A lot of the presumptions about what makes a great story on television have to change when you get into the online environment, and that's what we're learning, and I think getting better at achieving.
You said that it was 2009 was the most profitable year in CNN's history. You have two main sources of revenue. You've got subscription and advertising. How does that break down? And what does the fact that you have these two streams of revenue mean for your competitors who don't? And when you look out at their landscape, what do you see?
Everyone, I think, in the media business is actively looking for multiple revenue streams. So, that's no secret.
Right.
And, this was a model that was created by Ted Turner and fostered and refined by his successors, Phil Kent, who runs Turner Broadcasting now, and we work hard to maintain it. Now, what drives both halves of the equation for us, the advertising and the subscription, is being essential. We're in the happy position of, that really few brands can attain, of being truly indispensable at times. Not all the time, but when it really matters, you've got to be watching CNN. That's the brand association that advertisers want, and that is a service that cable and satellite providers must offer their viewers. We just lived through that with Haiti, right? Where if you didn't have CNN, how would you know what was going on there? So we focus very much on that, on over-delivering in those circumstances and maintaining that position, because when you think about it, there aren't that many brands in the world that are ever indispensable. Now, we're not always indispensable. We strive to be, but we're not always. But boy, when we are, we're in some pretty rare company, and we want to work to keep that.
Well, so this brings me to the notion of your competition. And I'll just throw out a metaphor here. I mean, I happen to think that cable news, 24-hour cable news, is kind of like the umbrella store, right? And there are a couple ways you can be a successful umbrella store. One is to make a damn fine umbrella so that when it rains, people know that they've got to go to the umbrella store. And the other is to tell people that it is raining all the time. Now, you have decided to go one route. But last year, in addition to being your most profitable year, you came in third on between 24 and 54, or 25 and 54. So, does that bother you? What happened with the ratings? And do you think that exposes a flaw in the notion of simply sticking with quality, making quality the hallmark, and hoping that there's enough news to get by?
Ratings for us are one metric that we look at, but we don't sell any one show or one day part in particular. We sell the overall reach of the network, and the way that we get those ratings are as important, if not more so, than the actual numbers themselves. There are many things that one can do to get a number. If we did most of them, we wouldn't be recognizable as CNN, which would mean advertisers wouldn't want to be associated with us, and cable and satellite providers wouldn't need to pay us what they pay us, because there's a lot of that other stuff around. So our mission is to deliver an audience based on over-delivering on the real journalism. And it's hard to do, but it's what we're very, very focused on. And what people forget is that ratings are one function of your overall audience, but just in terms of the cume, the sheer number of people who are watching us, we are number one. We've been number one forever. We are focused on maintaining that position. I'll give you an example. In the month of February, CNN US had 100 million viewers. Fox had 91 million viewers. We have 10% more viewers than they did. Theirs stay longer. We would like to get ours to stay longer. And the staying longer, combined with the sheer throw rate, is what results in the rating. Those ratings don't count out-of-home viewing, but they increasingly will. They don't count the people who have watched online or on mobile devices, but we will get to the day when they do. And when they do, the ratings will reflect the cume that we now see.
You're famously unflappable, but does it bother you to be in third? I mean, all of these things said, profitable company, lots of growth, multi-platform. Is it something, I mean, I'm presuming you'd rather be in first.
Well, in the ratings, you mean, because we think of ourselves as being in first. I mean, we're the work that we do is hands down the best TV journalism around, day in and day out. So we're in first there. We have more viewers than our competitors do, so we're in first there. We're number one by a mile in digital news, both on the web and on mobile devices. So we're number one there. We're internationally, we're the number one most recognized name in international news. So, if you want to define it as 3 hours in prime time in the month of February, then okay, but our competitors would like to define the universe of cable news as that. But we're fortunate that our business is much more vast and all-encompassing. The competition I'm really afraid of are social networking sites, not only because of the sheer numbers of people who engage in Facebooking and tweeting, especially at night. It used to be that internet prime time was daytime, but now you come home and you engage in the world of Facebook, and so that's just an alternative, that threatens to pull people away from us. But on top of that, if you think about it, the people you're friends with on Facebook or the people you follow on Twitter are trusted sources of information. Well, we want to be the most trusted name in news. We don't want your 1,000 people you're following on Twitter to be the most trusted source to you. And yet, face it, the people that you follow, you sort of, you listen to their recommendations, you follow the stories or click on the links that they send to you, you trust them. And that's a challenge. And we have to rise to that challenge. So I'm far more worried about 500 million people on Facebook than I am about 2 million people watching Fox.
Does CNN TV have a social media director?
Not in title, but we've got a social media group that's got a couple of folks who are thought leaders, and we don't try to segregate it out as a separate function. We try to integrate it into everything that we do. So all of our thinking involves ways to reach out to those communities. I remember when it was painful listening to my bio there because I've been working a long time. But I remember when it was controversial that I was the first guy at CBS News, seeing my old pal right over there, to put my email address on my business card. And people said, what are you trying to, why would you want people to know that, But we've got to constantly be looking to reach out to an audience that is increasingly dying to be part of the process and the conversation. That's a good thing. People bemoan the state of journalism today, but in fact, conditions have never been better for journalists. That's one of the reasons. The audience wants in. They don't want to turn their backs on news and information. We're living in an age of information. They crave even more of it. The easier it is to get your hands on information, the more of a demand that it creates. Also, it creates confusion and complexity. And those organizations like yours or mine that can make sense out of the sheer maelstrom of information that's out there stand to do pretty well, as long as we keep our eye on our expenses and we keep our eye on the quality.
What's your sense of what they want? This is a question for all of us, but when you wade into that space, when you wade into Facebook, and when you have folks starting to tweet, do you know what they want from you? Or how do you actually listen is the other question.
Yeah, they certainly want reliability. They want to know that what they're seeing or hearing or watching is true. And that's a big part of the quest. Now, they will then take that nugget of truth and spread it around to their friends, hold it up to the light, interpret it, discuss it, kick it around, send it back, look for more. But if we can be the pipeline for reliable, accurate information, that's a pretty essential function in the world of these social networks. And that's why not clouding the work that we do with suspect partisanship really helps our business. You can try. I don't think it's an accident that we're the number one source of news in the digital world, because people know that they can rely on what we're giving them. It might not always be the sexiest or the most fun or the most outrageous or the craziest, but it's the most dependable, and that's really important.
You use the word nonpartisan a lot, and you believe that CNN is nonpartisan and non-ideological. A Pew study from 2009, July, said that 46% of CNN viewers identified themselves as Democrats, 13% as Republicans. On Fox, the breakdown was 38% Republicans, 18% Democrat. Does that sound right to you?
I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I think when you get 100 million people watching you in a month, as we did last month, just on TV, let alone the tens of millions more who access us online and who watch us internationally, you are going to get a lot of everything. And we cannot begin to try to suss out what angle those people most want us to take. I understand the idea of appealing to a niche, and some very successful and profitable businesses have grown up around servicing a niche. That's not what we're here to do. I guess we are here to service a niche. It's the niche of people who crave information and want to understand what's going on in their world. We think you can build a hugely successful business on that. That's what we're in the middle of doing. And we want to pursue that direction because that niche is increasingly underserved. The more you have ultra-partisan sources of information, and the more that, certainly in the cable world, the other cable so-called news networks drift to the extremes, the more we have the whole sphere of people who just want their information straight to ourselves. It's great news for us. Let those guys have the fringes. We'll take the vast number of people out there, everywhere, who just want dependable, reliable news.
Just to step outside of CNN, just let's talk about sort of American society and democracy. What does it mean for the future of American society if people's news sources and their politics harden, and we get a kind of permanent alignment of news sources? Is that dangerous?
I don't know that anything is permanent in this society. I mean, look how much has changed just in the last 5 years. There's been exponential change. If we were sitting here literally 5 years ago, there wouldn't be Twitter. There wouldn't be 3G phones. There was barely Facebook. There was no YouTube. Things, and so then project forward 5 more years, nothing's going to be the same. The one constant that we're betting on, and we may be wrong, but the constant we're betting on is that people are going to want dependable information to fuel all these conversations. Now, they may retreat into as many niches down that long tail as you can devise, but ultimately, the vast majority of them are going to link back to something on CNN. That's our mission. I think that's what other mainstream news organizations are trying to do as well. That doesn't mean you can't build a good business over servicing the niches as well. It just means there still has to be some source that is thought to be at least nonpartisan and playing it straight. But now that's a fight for us. We have to, there are other folks who spring up with organizations that have news in their name or who will deliver aggregated information from other places. So we have to fight in that sphere, and we fight. I mean, we're very competitive, but all that competition makes you better. I mean, I'm a capitalist. I think the more competition there is out there, and we can look at our own experience at CNN to say that 15 years ago, when, the good old days, when we had zero competition. I mean, there was no other cable competition. There was no internet to speak of. Mosaic or Netscape was just going to go public that year. So there wasn't a consumer internet, really. There was no competition. Today, we have 50% more viewers and users than we did then. So today, we're beset by competition on all fronts, but our business is stronger than it's ever been. We're making so much more money now than we made back then. We think competition is healthy. It forces you to be better. And the highly networked audiences of today are more discerning than ever. So they're more demanding of the best. And that's why, a movie like Paranormal Activity, made on a shoestring budget, you can spread the word immediately. Everybody can go see it. You can have a big hit movie for not a lot of money. Why? Because the audience is so good at spreading the word about what's working and what isn't. That should help us. That's an extra editor to tell us, hey, you guys didn't cover the Iran protests well enough, for 3 hours in the middle of the night back in June. Be better about that. And we've been better about it. That's only helpful. It only makes us better. It's good for our people internally to pay attention to the criticism out there and try to over-deliver and to quiet it. So we like to roll up our sleeves and compete in that arena. We don't think anybody is as good as us at covering the news and interpreting the news. But we don't take that for granted. We gotta keep fighting.
One of the things I've heard you say before is that you feel like CNN has to transition long-term from a logistics organization to a reporting organization. Can you unpack that for us?
Well, yeah, when you don't have any competition, simply showing up to the girl who's fallen down the well or whatever, simply getting there is the big achievement. Remember, it was amazing. Oh my God, it's 2 p.m. and I can turn on the set and get news. How great! Didn't used to, right? I mean, that was the amazing value proposition of CNN. And we got very, very good at that, and we still are. I mean, just logistically so smooth, and we have such a vast network of affiliates who help us immeasurably in being everywhere. And yet, nowadays, you can see all kinds of things all the time. So you've got to provide more than just being there. Well, that was a big new idea for the people at CNN who were world-class at getting there. Offering the depth and analysis is harder. It takes more brain power, it takes more work, it takes more thought, it takes more creativity. And I think we've come really far in the 5 years that I've been there in living up to that. But that is where we are going to continue to try to make a difference. It's why we introduce people like Fareed Zakaria on our air, because there's a guy who makes sense of the world. And a guy like him wouldn't have had a place on a cable news show 10 years ago, because he is the opposite of being about just getting there. He's about, all right, you got there, now what's this all about, right? Ali Velshi has a new show from 1 to 3 o'clock on CNN. He's a guy, he's our chief business correspondent, anchors a show. It's not a business show, it's a show that just makes sense of the world, because Ali is a guy who thinks incessantly about, well, what does that mean, and why that? And let me put those two together, so synthesis becomes really important.
So you've used some interesting words: analysis, making sense of the world, synthesis, and yet they're similar to the word opinion. But the word opinion is not something you necessarily want to be associated with.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between somebody who has actually been places and seen what's actually going on, coming back and analyzing for you. Okay, this is what I saw. This is the situation there, right? As opposed to somebody who is paid to sit in a cloistered environment and throw bombs based on who his friends are and who he wants elected and what bill he wants passed or not passed, or she wants passed or not passed, or what they've read, or what will get them a big number on their radio show. I mean, it's the difference between being informed firsthand. There are some very well-informed folks who are opinion leaders, but they're informed not by actually getting in there and doing the reporting. They're informed by a lifestyle and a philosophy, and that, yes, they can get their hands on a lot of data and interpret it the way that they want to. So we are all for reporters who will go out, spend time in the field, and come back and tell us what's going on, right? But we don't want them advocating a particular policy or not. Our anchors and reporters don't do that. We will have on people who advocate policies or not, and we'll hope that we can have an intelligent conversation about it. Sometimes we hit the marks, sometimes we don't. You know, the sheer volume of stuff that we do ensures that, you know, even if we're batting 600, there are going to be examples anybody can pick at the time when we fell short. Now, we're on a mission to eradicate those as much as possible. And the thing that impresses me about the very best outlets of journalism, whether they are the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, or in their world, Vanity Fair, or 60 Minutes, or NPR, let's say, is that they virtually don't miss a step. That is, pick a random page in the Wall Street Journal, it lives up to the very high bar that they set all the time. And 60 Minutes, it's tough to find a bad story. There are some. I used to be the executive who oversaw 60 Minutes, and I would screen. That made me, by the way, I wasn't the executive producer of the show. That was the brilliant and amazing genius Don Hewitt. I was there to approve, basically, Mike Wallace's flights on the Concorde. And that was made clear to me.
Well, that is a full-time job.
You said it.
Yeah.
Got that right. But I did get to watch every single piece that they did. And, there are highs and lows, but they're all basically, they all start here. Chris Rebeck is here, who worked on that show. the impressive thing about the very best, Vanity Fair, boy, the journalism in there of the sort that they do is phenomenal and consistently outstanding. And that's what we want to get to, is just consistent, outstanding, in-depth reporting and analysis.
Is that doable 24 hours a day?
I think so. If the Wall Street Journal can put out 50, 60, 70 pages every single day that hit a pretty high level of erudition, depth of reporting, insight, analysis, then yeah, I think that it's absolutely doable. It all depends on the people who you have doing it, both on screen and behind the scenes. And that forces a change in an understanding of what it is we're supposed to be doing on cable news. The president these days loves to deride cable news and paint it as the worst of it, which is these circuses of over-the-top pundits just throwing mud at each other. Well, we don't want to be that. The first thing I did when I came in, literally the first thing I did was I canceled that show Crossfire, because I thought it had degenerated sometimes at its worst into that. Sometimes it was brilliant, and it had started out as a refreshing new concept. But anything that's around too long starts to become a caricature of itself, and then so many imitators sprung up. Differentiation is so important to us. I was confident that you could come up with a different way of talking about events, and out of that came the situation, which we want to be an island of. Yes, in-depth reporting on the latest developments in everything that's going on, but also some really intelligent discussion. Yesterday on the Situation Room, you had Secretary of Education Arnie Duncan sitting across from former Secretary of Education Bill Bennett, just talking about education policy in this country. Right? That's not a circus. That's not the caricature that the president criticizes. And that is what we're striving to be. Can we do that 24 hours a day? If we really apply ourselves, we can. But if one producer forgets the mission, and slips back into doing it the way that it worked back in 1989, which we all ingrain habits, right? We all carry with us the best practices from an age that's long past, then we're going to trip up. And a big part of my mission is to get folks in the present, focused on the current mission, and not falling back onto the bad habits. That is a massive undertaking, but you can get there.
It's interesting because you want to do certain things. When you have Arnie Duncan and Bill Bennett debating education, really talking about it. At the same time, it's 24 hours. You have competition. How are you smart about Balloon Boy? Is it about not covering it? Is it about covering it and getting the helium expert on it? There are stories that your network is going to get down the
Yeah, the rule of thumb for us is we're always going to cover breaking news, right? If God forbid, the kid was in there, would we have been doing a disservice to have covered it? Of course not. I mean, it was horrific. Everybody was talking about it in that instant, right? The trick, I think, is to move off of a story when you get into the speculation mode. Okay, so that night, we had on the parents of the kid on Larry King Live. Wolf Blitzer was filling in, and his parents, it was during that interview that the kid blurted out, that he, right? Okay, totally legitimate to cover that story live as it's breaking. Everything, by the way, is, you've got to say, in comparison to what? Given the alternative, what else? So, yes, if the president had announced that we were invading a country or something at the same time, of course, we would have...
You would have split the time. You would have had balloon.
Exactly. Could he do it from a balloon?
Right, would that be okay?
Sure, yeah. But we cover the live event. We get the principals on the air live to talk about it. And then what we want to do is drop it after that. And we pretty much did. I mean, we covered it, I think, the next day. We probably put it in our newscast because there was outcry over what that boy had blurted out on our air. So we covered that, the speculation that there would be charges brought and all that. But then we pretty much dropped it until the guy pled guilty. Now, not everybody did. The norm of cable news is take a little incident and then speculate like crazy for as long as you think you're getting numbers from it. But I had an insight when I was running the online video company that you talked about, the Feed Room, because we were at one point delivering about 1 million streams of news video per day. This was back when I was there, it was 2003, 2004. And at 1 million streams a day, you can start to see patterns emerge. And one of the very clear patterns was that day 2 of almost any story dropped off the map in terms of traffic. The audience's body clock works so much faster now that once they get it and they move on. And we've tried to bring that to cable news, to CNN, and say, listen, the audience is over it a lot faster than you are. This morning, before I came over here, I'm missing our morning editorial meeting to do this, but I sent a note saying, listen, I think that this Massa story is kind of, we get it. You know, he was exposed yesterday, good story yesterday, it's interesting, an intriguing figure, maybe he embodies the dysfunction of Congress, maybe he's willing to reveal certain things, but it turns out, not so much. So now, the instinct of most producers, though, is, oh, we got a hot story, I'm going to continue to pump it for a while. What they're not thinking about is that the audience gets it already. The audience is over it. The audience isn't sitting there, oh, I wonder why that. The audience knows. Massa, crank, you know, is what they think. And so why do we want to feed that? Now, that doesn't guarantee that some errant producer here or there in the sea of stuff that we're putting on today isn't going to inadvertently or not unthinkingly do something on Massa, but it means directionally, we're trying to move on beyond Massa right now, even as we speak. I think the better we get at that, the more we'll be in tune with where the audience is. So we try to avoid the speculative phase of a story. Tiger Woods is another example. We covered the crash. That's a big story. You know, I remember when Princess Di crashed a car, right? Crashed a car. We covered that as breaking news. We covered it until we knew early on what had happened. Once you got the picture, oh, I get it. Had a domestic fight, raced out of the house, crashed his car. We severely dialed back. And what we purposely did not do was get into that, partake of that speculative phase where every cable show had on the psychologists and the sex addiction counselors and the this and that and the bimbo revelation du jour. You know, but by the time the 12th one has raised her hand, it's like, we get it. And so we're trying to not feed that, but others don't. It's a legitimate call for others with a different news philosophy, but I pointed out to our own people, I said, listen, I believe that 60 Minutes would interview Tiger Woods if they could get Tiger Woods. And I think we should interview Tiger Woods if we can get Tiger Woods. But we don't have to interview every Tom, Dick, and Harry who comes out who thinks they have something to say about this so they can sell their book or what have you. And I think that's the difference between what we're trying to do and what the rest of the gang is doing.
For those of us who are outside of TV watching, is it harder and more important to have good producers or good on-air talent?
They're both essential because a good talent can really drive the boat. Producers tend to be deferential toward the talent, so a talent who either can't execute what we're talking about or doesn't want to can throw a major roadblock in front of the best intentions of a brilliant producer. But just the nirvana is a talent who sees it and gets it, and a producer who can help them achieve it. When you think Tom Matad, the producer paired with Ted Koppel, right, on Nightline, took Nightline to another level. Jeff Zucker, who's a brilliant producer, the Today Show, paired with Katie Couric, you know, it's that. That's what you're striving for. That's why we hired Tom Matad to produce our Sunday morning talk show, State of the Union, with Candy Crowley. You know, and Candy's a good example of a person who doesn't want to traffic in the normal cable BS. She wants to have real conversations about it. It doesn't mean she can't have fun. You know, we're not trying to become C-SPAN. You know, we think...
What, you don't think that business model's working really well?
Sexy as it is, yeah. But you know, for me, Zakaria is fascinating to watch. It's not like homework. It draws you in, and it opens your eyes, and it gives you stuff to talk about with people, and it seems smart at a cocktail party. Well, that's valid, and that is a huge opportunity for us if we can seize it. So that is driven by a talent like Candy, who gets it and can do it, and then a producer like a Tom Matad who can make it happen on TV. But I think too many producers and too many anchors and correspondents have been corrupted by the direction that the business has gone in the last 20, 30 years. Toward less intelligent, more fireworks, more, sort of fake, and when that stuff was new, and I was there when it was new, it was exciting, and it was different, and it was, yeah, let's do that, it's been so stodgy, let's bust that. But then everybody started doing that, and therefore there's an oversaturation of the meaningless and the trivial, and the meaningless and trivial has its place. You know, I mean, it's fun to graze in some of that stuff sometimes, but then you've got to deliver something more substantive at some point, because we're living in times that demand serious information and a real understanding of it. And you gotta get a sense of, you know, what should my kid major in college, right? What should he aim to do with his life, and why, and where's this all going, and how am I going to live when I'm 90 years old? Will I live, and how, and all of that. And you know, that we have to grapple with in a meaningful way. And if you do that, you get ratings. If you do it consistently over time, we will build on the 100 million people we had last month, and hopefully we'll get 200 million people, right? Because then you really are cementing yourself into the lives of folks. The way that we do in our finest hours, Haiti being a good example, the election of 2008, when we beat, you want to talk about ratings, we had more viewers on election night when Obama got elected, and on the big primary nights and on the big debate nights, we had more viewers than even the broadcast networks did. That had never happened before, right? We had done well on occasions when nobody else was covering the thing. When we were in Baghdad in 1991 and no one else was, well, you had to watch CNN. Or, you know, the Bronco chase in 1995, long before I was there, well, nobody else had that. But never before had we competed on an equal footing on the same events, the conventions, all of those things, with the broadcast networks, and gotten more viewers than they did. But that's because we have earned it over time. And I think that's a model for us to live up to. Hard to do, but not impossible to do, especially with our so-called competitors ceding all of that ground to us. I don't mean just election coverage, I just mean the ground of actually covering what's going on in the world rather than turning it all into a caricature.
You mentioned the president a little bit ago. What's the nature of the relationship between CNN and the White House, and this White House? I mean, I'm not trying to get at your specific relationship, but how do you think they're doing as far as outreach to cable?
I sense it's sort of the way that it was before. I think that a lot of reporters thought that there was going to be some golden age of goodwill, with the Obama administration coming in, and we told them, guys, these are hard-bitten politicians who will use us to further their ends, and smear us when we don't serve their purpose, and we had, I think, the same sort of level of conversations as ever before. I mean, I think they made an effort at the beginning to bypass media, and yet at the same time they've been strangely fixated on the traditional journalistic outlets. They're really fixated on the mainstream broadcast network, say Sunday morning shows, and reporters. For a group that came in by appealing to the grassroots through the internet, they've quickly reverted, I think, in an incorrect way to a kind of old-fashioned approach, and I think they mishandled the whole attacking Fox thing, because they attacked Fox for doing partisan loaded journalism, but they forgot to attack MSNBC for doing the same thing. It's because MSNBC was agreeing with them. And so I thought that took that out of the realm of a statesman-like comment and made it just another partisan type of foray. But I think in general it's that same kind of tenuous relationship. They're trying to use us when they can to stay in office or get their policies across, and we're trying to hold them accountable. The beauty of another reason that I'm so bullish about the future of journalism is because we're living in a time that is so skeptical of authority, and especially among millennials, they're so distrustful of everybody. Well, that's what reporters are supposed to do. Millennials want the powerful held accountable. Well, that's what we're supposed to do. So you have a built-in audience that's growing of folks who want to know the real answers and don't want us to buy the line of the powerful hook, line, and sinker. Well, good. If we do our jobs right, we're going to be playing right into their hands. They ought to love us.
This brings us to something that sort of dovetails. You've been talking about trying to do complicated stories, trying to be clear and analytical, and also trying to hold people accountable. How do you think CNN's done on its coverage of the financial crisis?
Okay. I think Ali Velshi is brilliant at standing in front of the big walls that we have, using graphics to explain terminology that you hear flying around. We could do more on the accountability side. I think the American public is still not clear on whose fault this was. Like, if you want to get beyond the populist kind of, burn all the bankers at the stake thing, and try to make them understand why. Why did this happen? Why should you be angry at this person or that institution or not? What do these big bonuses actually mean? We get that they're infuriating, but what is it about that you should understand? That's what we're trying to get at. Sometimes successfully, sometimes not. What I don't want us to be is simply fanning the flames. And that's a new instinct. You grow up as a TV producer, you're taught, look, if the public is talking about this or angry about that, do stories that tap into that anger. But I don't think that that's the role of the journalist, is to, kind of like market research, what they're mad at and do more stories about what assholes people are that they're mad at. I think you need to help enlighten folks and help them understand things. I think the audience that we're after is really into new ideas and new ways of thinking about stuff. And we could probably do a better job on that score.
Do you think your journalists understand the root causes? I mean, I'm trying to diagnose, because obviously we're in this business every day and every week. Do you think your journalists understand it? Is it a problem of them not getting all the complexity, or just not being able to explain it?
I don't know if anyone can explain it. I don't know if Ben Bernanke can explain it, and he's the leading scholar on the Depression.
We tried to get him. I hate to say it, with the second book, we tried to get him.
But it's in a world where really the so-called experts have no clue. What you can do for viewers, I think, and your online readers, is to at least put out the theories and discuss them and dissect them in an intelligent way. And that's what we're trying to do. I don't know that there's the one answer or answers. If anybody's going to do it, it's going to be publications like yours, because you've got probably more expertise. But
we only have geniuses.
Yes, starting at the top.
One of the things that I actually regret while I was at Time was that we didn't stop, examine the complexity, and actually get everybody trained up. I actually think if we brought more people in to give us their view and talk more as a group, and really just stop the story for a bit, for our own sake, we might have been able to do a better job. I'm wondering if you think that, and if there are other examples where you think it might be useful.
Well, it's funny. We launched a series of what we call money summits on our air in the wake of the financial crisis. You may have even participated in some of them, where we leveraged the brain power of the whole Fortune business group, Fortune and Money and Time Magazine, online and television and print thinkers, and we had some really great conversations in prime time about this. So that was our attempt to do that. It comes and goes, though. You have to do anything so often, with so much frequency, so consistently, at the same time, before anybody even understands you're doing it, that most things kind of fly off. That's why one of the things we're trying to do is, it's not quite fewer things better, but it's essentially that idea. That's why I wanted to give Ali Velshi his own show every single day, so that every day at least you had something to hang your hat on and say, that guy says smart things every afternoon as I'm eating my sandwich at my desk, and I'm going to tune it in and see it, and I'm going to watch him online, and I'm going to message him, and I'm going to follow him on Twitter, and I'm going to, and I think that's the path we're doing.
You said that it's publications like BusinessWeek that really focus on that level of complexity. Is there a ceiling as far as your ability on television to explain complexity? Are different mediums better at different things, or do you dismiss that?
I don't think so. Especially with the sophisticated graphics that we have. Those of you who saw John King standing at the touchscreen during the election coverage, he was explaining very complex ideas and machinations with lots of data, but we were using technology to kind of tap right into John's brain and access that, and I thought it was extremely understandable. So often, my problem, look, I'm a guy who dropped Econ 101 in week 3 because staring at those charts, I never knew what the shaded area represented. I just kind of stared at it. I don't know. And I'm sure that that kid in the front row who was always shooting his hand up is now a zillionaire head of a hedge fund, I'm sure. But I think sometimes sitting alone, it's hard to digest, and it's hard you can read an article and, understand some of the pillars of this stuff, but you want to see the back and forth and kind of hold it up and examine it from a lot of different perspectives. John King, by the way, launches his new show, JK USA, 7 p.m., March 22nd, Monday through Friday. So, it's another effort.
I'm not sure if that was an incredibly smooth.
It was a crawl.
Incredibly clumsy play.
It was like a crawl.
Oh, okay,
yeah. But we're giving John a show because that's another place that we want people to feel, oh, okay, I know at least there I'm going to get this kind of data dump and more insight on a regular basis. But really, we did a study. This is amazing. We did a study about people's viewing habits. We actually looked at the Nielsen data. We asked a group of Nielsen families what their favorite shows were. Just list your 3 favorite shows. And then we tracked, using the Nielsen data, how often they actually watched their favorite shows. And their self-described favorite shows. And the average, out of 10 episodes of their favorite show, so if it was Monday Night Football, it was how many out of 10 weeks did they watch? If it was The Sopranos, it was how many weeks, right? Or it could be daily shows or whatever. The average was 1.5 out of 10 were watched. Favorite shows, these are their favorites. The number 1 was The Sopranos, 3.67. These are people who are paying for HBO, right? Who are recording HBO, right? Still, they're only one, right? So it tells you the frequency with which you've got to beat the drum on anything that you do. That's why it's so important for us to be consistent. And that's why until we're really totally consistent, somebody can always say, well, I saw you talking about the Balloon Boy on Saturday morning at 8 a.m., so you're full of it. It's like, it's going to take a while to make it constant, but I think places like NPR have nailed it. In terms of consistency.
Is John King replacing Lou Dobbs?
Yes, his show replaces the Dobbs show.
So I just want to briefly return to Lou and the notion of opinion and analysis. Was that over the line? I mean, at the time, I know we said that there was difference of opinions. He wanted to go. Did you, and you were diplomatic about it, but at the time, did you think, this is not where I want my network to be positioned?
Well, I think we were all pragmatic about it. Yes, I mean, we were overt about saying, this is not what we want CNN to be about. We've made a conscious choice that as the others gravitate toward opinion of the ever more extreme variety, we do not want our anchors or correspondents to engage in opinion. We want to showcase opinionated people and have lively debates about different points of view about things. There's certainly no one point of view that has to be received wisdom, or should be. And we achieved that very nicely in our election coverage, let's say, where you had a room full of people, who represented just about every stripe of insight or perspective. But we just didn't want to do a show that featured a host pushing his opinion, and Lou understood that and acknowledged that it just wasn't the sort of thing he wanted to do. He favors advocacy journalism now, and so he wants to pursue that. And out of respect for one another, we parted ways.
As an advocate, would you ever have him back on the air?
Oh yeah, sure. As an analyst or as an advocate of a point of view, sure. I mean, he's a very intelligent guy who's up to speed on his issues, and sure.
Just a sort of cultural question about CNN. For decades, we all had our traditional rivals. Time and Newsweek, and I could tell you all sorts of secrets about what they say about each other. But I'm curious, when people at CNN talk about Fox, is it like Crips talking about Bloods? Is it like Yankees talking about Red Sox? Aniston, Jolie? I mean, how much do you get into that?
Truthfully, I mean, I think that at Fox they have very cleverly fostered a culture of kind of sort of an Alamo-like environment. Right? It's us against the world, and we were the symbol of that to them. For us, as I say, we're far more focused on all of the things that are changing out there, all of the competition for eyeballs, loyalty. We're more competitive about the quality of the journalism. And in that respect, we feel like the New York Yankees. And I think if you ask the Yankees, what do you think of the Devil Rays? Or what do you think of the Phillies? Or what do you think of the White Sox? They'd say, we respect them. They have some good players. They have some skills. They're not the Yankees.
I think it was smart of you to go with Yankees and not Crips.
Well, I was born 3 blocks from Yankee Stadium, so I can't help it.
What news asset do you most covet? And this is just, it can be a personality, it can be a show, it can be a bureau, but what noun in news do you most wish you had?
60 Minutes by a mile. It's just, you talk about consistency over time. It's so impressive. And it's so impressive the way that Jeff Fager, the new executive producer, updated a classic. And that's the hardest thing to do. You know, those things can go one of two ways. And boy, he took it up. And it's so rewarding to watch all the time. I invoke it constantly. I learned so much from Don Hewitt when he worked for me. He told me, we had lunch my first day on the job. I was 37 years old. I had been making documentaries. I had never worked at 60 Minutes. I had done one piece for them as a one-off. But and there I was now suddenly in charge of it, supposedly. And he took me to lunch my first day. And he said, "Kid, let me explain your job to you. I have 10 ideas a day. 9 of them stink. You have to tell me which one doesn't." Like, okay. I was really too scared, though, to do that. You know, I told them they were all great. That was a mistake, because they're not. They weren't. But, you know, the things that he saw, and Jeff Fager is a guy who I worked with on the overnight shift you mentioned. Jeff was my boss. He was the producer. I was 24. He was 28 or something. He was brilliant then. He was so good. And it's heartening to see that outstanding people actually can, 30 years later, attain the very height of the top. But I think they're brilliant. And I would love for us at CNN to attain the same level of consistency that they do now. Our producers say to me, "Yeah, but they're on once a week, right? 1 hour a week." And I say, "Yeah, but you only produce 1 hour. You produce it, right? So just worry about your hour." Everybody, that's where we're trying to get to.
Have you, you've launched, CNN has had news magazine shows in the past. Is that something you consider again?
I'm not sure that the magazine format is what viewers today want. If the work is outstanding, you can maybe get there, but it's got to be so outstanding so often that the prep time on magazines risks putting you sort of out of sync with what's going on now. We do want to get away from the business, especially at night, of simply telling you what happened today. Because, among the big changes in the news environment, just in the last 2 years, the number of people getting their information online or digitally on devices has increased 30%. So people are pretty up to speed on what happened today. You've got to give them more insight into not only what happened today, but what's going on. And so that's where we want to be for the most part. I love storytelling. I was a magazine producer. I love that form. You have to pick your spots. Investigative, for sure. Long form, investigative stories, absolutely. Documentaries, absolutely. We just won a President's Award from the Emmys for the outstanding documentary stuff that we've done. Christian Amanpour and Soledad O'Brien. And that whole investigative and documentary team, brilliant. So we want to continue to do that. But a classic magazine show, that may be in the category of something that's available in other places that we don't have to do.
ABC News recently laid off a fair amount of people. And I think we're in decade 3 now of the march toward inevitability when the 3 network nightly newscasts may or may not exist. Are you one of the people who thinks that, in the capital letters, something will be lost if we don't have the network block at 6:30?
No. I didn't even think that when I worked at the network. I was executive vice president. I used to tell my boss all the time that we at least should think in a fresh way about how we do it. For right now, those shows still, if you look at the accounting the right way, they still make money and they still attract audiences that I guess make it plausible for the networks to continue. But we can't cling to the forms and formats and formulas of the past when the world is changing so rapidly underneath us. You've got to question everything. Now, you can question and then conclude that, we should stay the course or we should evolve, and I think that's what they're trying to do. to maintain the approach that they have, but do it in an economical way. You have to do that. But we can't be madmen. You watch Mad Men, and those guys were just oblivious to the changes that we all know as the audience are coming. Oh, what is that? What year is that? 62? Oh my God, in 3 years. We can't be that. And, I often walk around New York, walking over to a meeting like this. I sometimes feel like, I'm in Mad Men. And, and I'm wondering, what is the thing that's coming now? Now, we have the benefit of actually being more aware, thanks to all of these sources of information and all the data. We're, I think, hyper aware of all the things that are going to be coming. And that's an advantage. So I think there are really smart, capable people running these news divisions and networks, and they are thinking about it all the time. So I don't by any means imply that, that they need anybody's help in understanding their businesses. But your question was, would something be lost? I don't think so, because there's so many sources of information. And there's going to be more of them. It isn't that, one of the tropes that you hear a lot is just that, with the decline of the traditional vehicles, there's going to be chaos and there's going to be no sources of reliable information. I just don't buy that. The audience is hungry for information, real reliable information, and they're hungry for analysis of it. There are more means to get information than ever before. That means both by amateurs and by professional practitioners. So that should help ensure that serious journalism continues, because it's cheaper to do than ever before. So, yeah, there may not be a half-hour evening newscast, but thank God there doesn't have to be. It's a great thing for journalism. That's why I'm so bullish about it. More people are practicing it than ever before. They may not make the same money, but the fact is, I don't know of anybody, literally anybody, who gets into journalism and stays in it for the money. Journalism is an obsession, not a profession. And therefore, it's going to continue. It's part of the human condition. People want to know what other people are doing.
We have to wrap up. I want to get to one last question, because I know you watch a lot of TV, and not always on your network. I oversee a magazine and a website. You put the magazine out, it's done. I can pass the writers. I can say, nice job. It's over.
What must that be like?
It's pretty sweet.
Yeah, I bet. Do you go have a cocktail or something?
We go to the pier, we get on a cruise, we do a harbor cruise.
That's very nice.
It's great.
Sure.
How much CNN do you watch in a day?
A ton. I watch or listen or read a ton, really a ton. It's just as a glimpse, I drive in and I have it on satellite. I watch it when I wake up, while I'm shaving, and the greatest thing, I don't know if you guys do this, but the Kindle, downloading a ton of blogs and stuff and newspapers, you can really motor through a lot of the freshest ideas of the day while you're shaving, if you're careful. I can't do it around the neck, but over here, it's a pretty straight shot. You can pretty much. How much damage are you going to do over there? So, then in the car listening, and then get to work, put it on. Now, there's degrees of watching, because sometimes it's muted and sometimes you're having a conversation. But then when I get home, thank God for time shifting, because I can put the kids to bed and immerse myself in them for a while, which is really nice, and then get back to it, and you can. I watch a lot.
And when you say put your kids to bed, you mean Larry King and Anderson Cooper?
Yeah.
All right.
That is the kids.
Yeah.
You mean not have my kids watch it in order to fall asleep?
Exactly.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
John, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And thank you.